Welcome back to Power Platform Junkies. Today we're going to look at how you automate certificate generation so that you can be able to send it to your attendees after every event or community call and so forth. So instead of focusing on the manual way of doing that, so that is sending your certificates one by one via email, which can be daunting, we're going to look at how you can automate that process using Power Automate and other tools. But without me wasting any more time and spoiling anything more, let's take a look at how you can be able to accomplish this. Right, let's head over to Microsoft Word. So if I was on home, for an example, it will seem like this. So we have to create a new document. The reason behind this is the idea is to have a template around certificates, and we want to use a template so that we can be able to automatically fill it in using Power Automate or using any automation that we've built. In this case, we're using Power Automate. So the first thing that you can do is we'll head over to new, and then we can search for certificates, and then we'll be able to see a list of options around all of the certificate templates that we can be able to use for this specific scenario. So in this case, we'll choose whichever one that actually looks best or looks better for Power Junkies or Power Platform Junkies attendees for all of those community calls. Okay, so we're going to choose the second option, and then we're going to select create, and then this will take us into the new document. So inside of the new document, we would need to do a few editing, because obviously this is a template and we are going to use this template a little bit later on. So the first thing that we want to change is we're not doing an employee of the month, but we are doing a certificate of attendance, right? So certificate of attendance. So if someone has been part of the Power Platform Junkies community call or any event that you may be doing on your end. And then the next part is it says, okay, this certificate is awarded to, so this part we're not going to change, but we are going to change the Alexander Martinson, this name that's already been put here. So what we're going to do is to actually delete that value that's there. So the reason why we're doing this is because we want to automatically fill this name and not manually do it. And the idea behind this is because we are trying to automate that process of having to spend a lot of time trying to send out certificates of attendance to your attendees. So in this case, we will try and automatically fill that. To do that, we need to utilize the developer option on the ribbon on Microsoft Word. So we're going to select developer. And then what we're going to see is there's a few options that are available here, but what we want to focus on is this tool, which is a rich text control or rich text content control and a plain text content control. So in this case, we just want to use the plain text content control because we're not using any rich text for this. So once you select that, it will add it as like a placeholder that we can be able to use. So it says here, click or tap here to enter text. In our case, we're not going to enter any text because it's going to be a placeholder for us. However, we need to select this text control that we've already added and go back to the ribbon on the developer tab and then select properties. We have to map it to we have to provide, let's say, a name that we're going to be able to identify it when we're using it on our Power Automate flow. So in this case, we're just going to say full name for an example because we want to call out the attendee as a full name. The title and the tag needs to be the same name or the same value, so make sure that you set it that way. And then you can do other stuff as well, like changing the font color. So we're going to change the font color maybe to match the colors that you see on the template. And then if we're okay with that, we can then select okay, and then you can be able to see that surfacing properly. And then the other thing that we need to edit, because obviously we're using a template, is for your stellar performance for the month of December. So in this case, we change this, we'll say for your presence, maybe in the Power Platform Power Platform Jenkins community call, right? Say community call, and then we leave it as that. So it doesn't have to be as lengthy as this one. And then you can also change the other parts here, which is who signed it. If you are using, let's say for example, you're doing this for a user group, you can change here and you put the user group leads or the team, and you put the date. But you can also add again a placeholder for both of those things. Like for example, for signing, you don't have to put a placeholder because it's going to be a constant value. But for date, you can put a placeholder because obviously, let's say for example, with this one, community calls are happening at different times. So you could have one on Friday this week, or you could have one next Friday, or any other Fridays following that. So you want to dynamically change the date, but you could follow the same principle as we did here with full name. You just add another control. But in this case, we're just going to leave this as is. I just wanted to show you how you can be able to modify and set up your template to be ready to be used in your automation. Now, we need to save this quickly, right? So we are going to save, and I need to save this in my PC. So I'm going to change the folder where I'm going to save it. I'm just going to put it in my desktop, and then I'm just going to click on certificate of attendance. Yeah, that's fine. I'll save it as that, and then once it's saved, I can then be able to switch over somewhere else. I need to change the content filters here so that I can be able to access it when I upload it in my developer environment. But this content labels allow you to control the security of your document, but we're not going to focus on that today. Okay, now let's switch over to my browser. Right, so we're going to switch over to my browser, and then as we're switching over to my browser, I just want to go to my OneDrive. So the first few things that we are going to need is a place where we are going to send the certificates to. So for an example, for this specific demo, I have gotten all of the files, or all of the names of the attendees that I needed for this demo, which is they are in the Excel file Power Platform Jenkins demo. So right, we are automating sending the certificate of attendance to all of the attendees, and we have those attendee values inside of an Excel file. Right, and it could be similar even for you if maybe, for an example, you're using a Microsoft form, and then you exported the results of that form into an Excel spreadsheet, and then you can just upload it into your OneDrive. I also have a certificates -word folder, which is an empty folder, by the way, so that I can send all of the first version of the certificates before I can convert them into PDF, but because the idea is to make sure that the attendees do not modify those, right? And then the other thing that you need is that is a SharePoint site. So inside of your SharePoint site or SharePoint document library is where you are going to be storing your certificate template, where we're going to be using that template that we just built using Word. We're going to store it inside of SharePoint so that we can then be able to call it into our Power Automate flow, and then we can populate it the way that we want it. And then I have another folder here that says certificates PDF. In this case, I just chose to put it inside of the SharePoint document library, but you could also look into it as part of your homework. Look into how you can have this folder inside of your OneDrive, for an example, as a folder as well, because I already have a certificates Word folder. Then you could have a certificates PDF folder as well, where you send all of those values. But that's just homework for you. So now what we need to do is to go inside of this document library, and then we select new, and then we're not going to select new because we're not creating a new file, but instead we're going to upload a file. So we're going to choose upload file, and then we're going to desktop, and then we're going to find our certificate of attendance template that we created earlier on. Right, so that means I need to close it. So if I close this file and then I go back and then I upload it. So once it's been uploaded inside of my SharePoint document library, we can then head over to Power Automate. Right. Now I'm inside Power Automate. So if you don't know what Power Automate is, it's where you can be able to build your automations without writing any code, using low code, no code experience. So inside of Power Automate, I'm not going to use Copilot as much as I'm tempted. I'm just going to head over to the Create tab. So I'm going to select Create inside of the Power Automate interface, and then I have a list of options here where I can choose automated cloud flow, instant cloud flow, and the rest of the others. So for this specific scenario, if you are building out an automation for certifications, for an example, you could choose to make it automated. You could build automated cloud flow, or you could build an instant cloud flow. I would not recommend you using an automated cloud flow for this, because that means that the minute someone registers, for an example, in your Microsoft form, they'll get a certificate of attendance, which is not ideal, which is not what you're looking for. So we are going to use an instant cloud flow so that we can just click on a button after the event has ended, and then we send the certificate of attendance. So we select instant cloud flow, and then we are going to say certificate of attendance, and then we choose manually trigger a flow, and then select create. Now this is where the magic is going to happen. So I'm going to try and zoom in a little bit so that we can be able to see this properly. Now the first thing that I need to do is to be able to get all of the values or all of the details of the attendees. Remember, the attendees, I have the values or details inside of an Excel spreadsheet. So I'm going to select add a new action here, and then I am going to search for Excel, and then there's a list of options that I can be able to use actions for Excel Online Business. But in my case, what I am much more interested in is the list rows present in a table, so that I can get all of the rows inside of the table that's present, or all of the values inside of my table. Right. I'm just going to try and sign in and create a new connection inside of my Power Automate, and I'm going to choose the account that we're going to use, or that we're using for Power Automate. Right, so the first thing that I need to do is to provide the location. So for location, I'm going to select the first option, which is OneDrive for Business. So here there's a lot of other locations that I could use, but in this case I'm just using OneDrive for Business because my Excel file is inside of OneDrive and not all of the other places. Then I need to provide the document library, so we have to choose OneDrive as the document library. And then for files, we need to select this folder so that we can be able to locate it inside of our OneDrive. Yes. So in this case, we are going to find our file, which is Power Platform Junkies demo.xlx. So in your case, it might be a different file name because you are storing your attendees in a different Excel spreadsheet or something like that. Then we need to provide the table. So in my Excel spreadsheet that has the values, I have a table, or I formatted all of the values inside of a table. So if I select this drop down option here, it will show me the name of my table. So in a case where you didn't format it as a table, or you didn't rename the table, it will be either table 1 or table 2. So I'm going to choose my table here, and then that's it for this action. The next thing now, right, so I have all of the rows listed from my table. The next thing is to populate that Word template, or that document that we created at the beginning of this video. So we're going to add an action, and we're going to search for populate a Word document. I'm going to search for that, and we are going to look for Microsoft Word. Look for an action that says populate a Word document, and then you can see it says Word Online Business, and then you choose populate a Word document template. Not the encoding one, but you use the actual Word Online, just like how we use Excel Online or Excel Online Business. And then we just need to provide the connection again. So I'm just going to create a new connection for this. Once that's done, I need to provide the details of that Word document. For an example, where is it sitting? So that template that we're using. So the template is sitting where? It's sitting in my SharePoint document library, right? And it's inside of my SharePoint site, which is called Power Platform Junkies, right? If you have a lot of sites, it will show you a list of options, but you have to make sure, or you make note which site did you upload your document template at, and then provide the document library, and then you just select or choose documents, because that's the only document library you have in your SharePoint site. And then now you need to provide the file inside of the document library. So again, you can see that it says Certificate of Attendance Docs, which is the file that we uploaded in our SharePoint site. So in this case, I should have uploaded it inside of the certificates template because I'm using it, or I want to make sure that everything is organized in my SharePoint site. But nonetheless, we can be able to use Certificate of Attendance directly. And then once that's done, we're not finished, right? So if I click away, I need to provide more details. More details being, remember that we added a field or a control that would take in the full name of the attendee. So this is where we need to provide it. So I can either choose for advanced parameters. Under advanced parameters, I can either choose to select this drop down, or I can just select show all, and then it will show me all of the properties that I need to provide values for inside of that Word template. So in this case, it requires full name. Now I can use dynamic content that's going to get us the values of the first name and last name from our Excel table, right? So if I select that lightning icon, it will give me the dynamic content, which is first name, and then I hit space because we want to provide the last name as well. So we also have first name and last name, we get our full name, and you would notice that it put it inside of a loop. Reason is because inside of this action, we are listing a number of rows. So we are getting a number of rows. We're not just getting one item. And this will populate that Word template for each of the values inside of our Excel spreadsheet. Right. Now, what's next? What's next is we need to create a new file, right? As you are populating this template, it's not actually writing it directly into that document. Like for an example, this document that you see here in our SharePoint site, it's not writing the value inside of this. We need to store it as a new document so that we can be able to utilize it over and over again. So how can we do that? We're going to select add another action, and then we're going to search for create file. And when you search for create file, we choose one that's under OneDrive for Business because we want to create that file inside of OneDrive for Business. And then again, I need to provide the connections to OneDrive using my account. So I think this is going to be a reoccurring theme. Now, once I've provided that, I need to provide the folder path where I want to create this new file in, which has the value that's being populated here. So I'm gonna select that file, and then I'm going to try and see if I can be able to find that folder. But it should have just quickly picked up our folder that we wanted to save it, which is certificates for Word, right? So if I refresh that, which is interesting, if I refresh that and I go back to Power Automate, and I try to see if we can be able to choose anything that's inside the root, as you can see. So all I needed to do is select the folder, select the next arrow icon, And then once I've selected that, I can be able to find the folder that I want to put this file in. Then I need to provide the file name. So to organize everything inside of your Word or inside of your OneDrive in this case, we want to organize these files and these certificates as who it's going to. So who's going to be on the full name property that we provided on our template. So we're going to use the attendee's full name, so we can be able to, if we have to debug later on and we want to organize everything, we can be able to do that with ease. So when I choose the dynamic content, which is first name, and I'll put a space again, add last name, and then it's going to ask me for file content. File content being what's being populated on our previous step. So we're going to use the dynamic content and choose Microsoft Word document from the previous action. Now, the next thing, which is probably something that is very essential to this step, is to convert this file from Word to PDF. So how we can be able to do that is just go back, add a new action, and just search for convert file. You choose it from OneDrive for Business. You could choose convert file, or you could choose convert file using a path, but in this case we're just going to use convert file. And then this is asking for a unique identifier of the file, so we want to point it to the proper file that we want to convert into PDF, right? So how can we do that? We can be able to use the dynamic content. So since it's being cut out here, you can enter on your keyboard / and then you will see those options, which is insert dynamic content, and then you can choose ID, which is the unique identifier of the file inside of that folder. Then, well, it has advanced parameters, which is the target type in this case. So you could choose to convert it to PDF, an image, or an HTML. So in this case, we're converting it to PDF. Then the next part is to take the converted file, because it's being converted inside of this Power Automate flow. It's not necessarily being stored anywhere in your library. It's stored in this weird limbo space. So for us to be able to have access to that, we need to send it to our SharePoint folder, because in my case I have a SharePoint folder for PDF files inside of that SharePoint site. So I'm going to select add an action, search for create file. You'll notice now the create file that I'm going to use is not for OneDrive for Business. It's actually for SharePoint. So I'm going to select create file. Reason is because I have my folder inside of a SharePoint site. But again, for you guys, as part of your homework, you need to find a way to see if you can create the file, convert it, and then store it inside of OneDrive without having to store it inside of SharePoint. So in this case, I just need to provide the site address for the SharePoint site, so I can find Power Platform Junkies, and then I need to provide the folder path, which would be, obviously, I will need to go to find the document library under shared documents, select this arrow, and then provide the folder that I want to store this PDF file, which is certificates.pdf. Then for file name, same as the previous step, which is we are going to use the first name space and the last name, and then in this case we're going to provide the extension, which is .pdf, so that we can be able to save it as a PDF and it can be able to render properly. And then you need to provide the file content, and then in this case file content will be coming from the previous step, which is convert file. You provide that, and then voila, that should be fine. And then the last action that you need is, now you have gotten all of your attendees from a list inside of your Excel spreadsheet, for an example, and you've populated that template that you created earlier on. Now you then created a new file that has their names on that template, and you've converted it to PDF. Now the last step is to actually send the certificate of attendance to your attendees. How can you then do that? You just need to search for send an email. Right, so you add an action, send an email v2 using Office 365 Outlook, and then you provide the details. So for an example, the details that you need to provide is the recipient. So for an example here, you just need to switch to advanced mode because we're going to use dynamic content. Select the dynamic content icon and then just go to the action for Excel and just choose email if you have an email column inside of your Excel spreadsheet. And then for subject, we can use certificate of attendance. And then obviously I'm just gonna grab what I've copied on the side. So you provide a body, which is dear. You call out the attendee by their first name, and then you give the message, which is thank you so much for attending our event. Please accept this token of appreciation, which is the certificate of attendance. But you don't stop there because you want to attach the file inside of the email. So you need to then go to the advanced parameters, select the drop down, and just select attachments. And then once you've selected attachments, you can then select add new under attachments, and then it will ask for the file or the attachment name. So you can use the dynamic content and use first name, and then you use last name, for control's sake. It's easier that way. It makes it more personified for the attendee. And then you provide the extension. Make sure you provide the extension for any other attachments that you are sending using Power Automate. Make sure you provide the extension after the file name, right? So we're going to say .pdf, and then the file content obviously is going to be the one that we used convert file from. So we select file content, and then yeah, everything should be fine. Once you've provided all of the details for the email action, be it the tool, the recipient of the email, the subject, the body, and also the attachment, then the only thing that we need to do now is to test this out. But another thing that I want to note quickly is that you need to be careful when you are using the create file action as well, where you need to provide the extension. So if you don't provide the extension of that file after the file name, then it won't be able to render the file properly, right? So we're going to use first name, last name, .docs, and then it will know that it's creating a Word document. If you don't have the file extension, it's not going to work. Now, the moment that we've been waiting for is to just test it out. So what I'm saying is actually just similar to even with the attachments, where we say first name, last name, .pdf. So same principle applies here as well as in the create file action. So let's test this out and see. We're going to click on manually, and then we're going to select save and test. We are going to see this in action, so I have to just authorize a few permissions here because I'm running this now. So the idea behind running the Power Automate flow like this is to obviously after the event or after the community call, we have to actually make sure that everyone is getting the certificate of attendance. We don't want them to get the certificate of attendance upon registration. The reason why I'm saying that is maybe you wanted to change this part to, let's say, an automated Cloudflow or something like that, for an example, in which this would be a Microsoft Forms trigger, for an example, or something like that. It's always safer to do it manually, trigger a flow, because this way you'll then be able to trigger this after the event and not during the time where the attendees are registering or the event is still happening. You don't want to send out certificates of attendance for people who didn't even show up as well, right? Okay, awesome. So it seems like we have a failure, and I think I know why. Everything else ran perfectly. The reason is because we are using a bad connection, so I think I need to provide a proper connection, or I need to sign in again, which is fine. We'll see the results of this a bit later on. So I'm just going to click on edit quickly, and once I've clicked edit, I'm just going to select change connection, and I'm going to add a new connection so I can be able to sign in all over again, because that's the reason behind that error. But you might find other errors, for an example, if you forgot the extension after the attachments or the extension after the create file, because it won't be able to convert to that file because it doesn't understand what file it is. Right, so I'm going to save this and we're going to test it again, but we're going to look at the results because everything else ran perfectly. So first things first, let's go to OneDrive. We get to OneDrive, we'll be able to see that, oh, there's a few files that were actually created using a Word extension. So you have a Word document. Those are the certifications for the three attendees of the event. You see that, which is cool, but you don't want to send those certificates of attendance to your attendees whilst they're in Word format because they will be editable. So we go back to SharePoint for an example, and we select the folder certificates PDF. And then we see that we actually have the same files, but now in PDF format. And these are ready to actually send out on email. Right, so you've seen this. So the first thing that I need to do to retest this is to probably just delete these files, because if we try to retest it again, it might give us an error. So we just want to see the email part. But regardless, that is basically how you would build out an automation to send out automatic certificates to your attendees. So I'm just going to go back to Power Automate and manually test this floor again. Hopefully this time it'll run properly after all of this debugging. But that is basically how you would go with this specific scenario. It may seem simple, but it makes the job much more easier for you to be able to say, okay, I have my attendees coming in, I have my event and they finished, and I want to show appreciation, but I do not want it to be taxing on my end. I want it to be time saving and not time consuming, so you can be able to build out a Power Automate flow like this. Right, so this ran successfully and I've gotten an email in my account, so you can quickly go check. Right, you see, there's the email. Very simple. It says, Dear Somelezet, calls the attendee by first name, and then it provides the message. And if you look at the certificate and I try to open it, you can see that it was the certificate that we created quite earlier on in the video. Right, other than that, that is how you can be able to build out an automation that will help you achieve this specific goal in mind. And if you want to see more of these things, make sure that you leave it on the comment section, or if you have any questions, just make sure that you leave it on the comment section. We'll be able to get back to you within a specific time period. And if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this, because we have more of these coming. Thank you so much.